Welcome to Cinnamon Babe Horror Stories. I'm Cinnamon Babe, and every Friday I discuss creepy topics while I do my makeup. So if that interests you, please like and subscribe, and please enjoy the video. Hey, so today we are doing two stories, and they are relating to this season 4 called Encounters, and both stories involve people who have mysterious encounters with the paranormal. So there's this boy who lived in a small duplex brick house in Maryland, and the house was built on top of a grave site. And so, of course, the house ended up being haunted. The boy lived in the house with his 2 parents and his 3 siblings, and there would be often times where they would hear footsteps going up and down the steps, but no one would be there. The young boy would often hear like silent whisperings along with the footsteps and stuff in the house, and there was also just a strange energy about the house, and he just kind of kept it to himself because he didn't think his family would believe him if he was to tell them what he was experiencing. So one night he was laying on his back in bed and he had fell asleep, and for whatever reason he ended up waking up, and at the foot of his bed he saw a soldier dressed in a Civil War uniform with like the musket type of gun just standing there. It scared the heck out of him, obviously, and he just ends up covering his face with the covers. So the boy ends up putting his head under the covers, but he only did it for a minute. I think his curiosity got the best of him, and when he removed the covers, the one soldier that was standing there in his room had left, and he ended up seeing a line of soldiers dressed the same way in the uniforms going like past his bedroom and down the steps in a long line. He said it must have at least been like 20 of them just going down the line as if they were, going into battle. And he said the last soldier in line stops in front of his room and begins to enter as if he's coming for him. So the boy gets up and frantically runs out of his room and through the soldier, proving that it was a ghost. So the boy runs into the bathroom screaming and crying, and while he's doing that, he's thinking, oh my gosh, my parents are gonna come in here and whoop me because I'm screaming. So his dad comes into the bathroom like, what's wrong? And the boy explains to him what he saw, and his dad, instead of being angry, his dad just crouches down and hugs him, and he's like, I know, son, I saw it too. So this strange encounter would not be the last experience that the boy and his family would experience. It would get much worse from there. I also should mention that the boy's mother also dabbled in voodoo, and he was not the only child in the house that experienced strange events. So one day, I don't know how old his sister was, but she's a child. One day, 3 women dressed in white knocked at the door, and the sister had answered the door, and they invited her to come to the park with them. And so she agrees, and I guess she leaves the house without telling anybody and goes to the park with these 3 women dressed in white. And so when they go to the park, the 3 women decide to teach the little girl how to make a bird feeder out of like a old gallon of milk, like an empty gallon, and cut it out and turn it into a bird feeder. So that's the activities that they did at the park, and nothing more, nothing less. After they got done making the bird feeder, they let her keep it. They took her back home, walked her back home. And when she came back into the house, the 3 women were gone without a trace. They were nowhere to be found. After they took her to the doorstep, she turned, they were gone. But she still had the bird feeder, and she didn't know how to make it prior to that. So through the years, the boy pretty much has a creepy childhood with just strange, creepy events happening in the home. He ends up growing up and going into the military. But before he went into the military, he got a job at a gun range, and one day when him and a co-worker were driving back to the facility of the gun range, they were leaving the gun range area and going back to the building, it was a little bit of a drive. They were driving in a beat up pickup truck, and the radio of the truck was broken, so it was basically quiet. So they're just chatting and driving back to the facility, And out of nowhere, it sounds like the radio had cut on, and they had heard a woman's muffled sounding voice like through the radio. That's what they thought. It sounded like it was coming from the radio. But really, the noise was coming from the floorboards of the car, muffling, like the muffle sound of a woman laughing and talking. They couldn't understand what she was saying, but it was clear as day that that's where the noise was coming from. So the two men in the car, they both confirmed that they had heard it. It wasn't just one person that heard it. They both had heard it and had no idea where it came from. The speaking from the floorboards of the car had went on for a while. And mind you, they were driving down like a lonely dirt road to make it even creepier. But the speaking had went on for a little while, and then it just completely stopped without a trace, and they just kept driving along, moving forward. And that is the end of story number 1. So in the late 1980s, there was a young girl named Felicia. She was growing up in Chicago, and she had a single mother raising her. And Felicia just pretty much grew up angry. She was just angry all the time, and she was rebellious towards her mother, and she was dabbling with drugs and drinking and just being a difficult child. Felicia also blamed most of her problems on God. Like, she wanted nothing to do with God. If anything, she was just really angry at God. And whenever her mother would try to listen to gospel music or talk about God in any type of way, Felicia would scoff and turn away. Like, she didn't want to hear about God at all. So Felicia barely graduated high school, but she was able to graduate and either get a scholarship or have her mom pay for her to go to college. But her mother no longer wanted her in Chicago because she felt like it was a bad environment. Like, there's a lot of crime in Chicago, and just Felicia was just hanging around the bad crowd, like where she had lived in Chicago. So her mother wanted her to go away for college. And so Felicia took that as her mother didn't want her anymore and didn't love her. So it just made her angrier and just more rebellious. So her mother sent her to West Virginia State College, where she thought it would be a better environment for her to go to school in. But Felicia rebelled even further. Felicia had a really nice roommate that was a Christian, and it still didn't make a difference. Felicia just still was very angry, didn't want to hear about God from anybody. And in college, Felicia was still drinking, smoking, dabbling with different drugs and stuff. And she even had 2 boyfriends. She just was really doing the most, just angry all the time, she said, and just always angry at God. She would think about God and just be angry. And she said she would even catch herself having full-blown curse out sessions to God. Instead of praying to God, she would just be cussing God out and just uncontrolled anger. Just a lot of anger towards God, just cursing at him, and she said the way she would cuss at God, it would be like she was having a full conversation with a person in the room. It was crazy. So Felicia's roommate ends up moving to a different dorm. I don't know if it was because of her, she just ends up moving to a different dorm room. And Felicia ends up alone in her dorm, and she said she starts experiencing strange energy. She just felt afraid all the time in there. And she said that the dorm room was always dark, no matter how sunny it was. They had windows in there. Everybody else's dorm room was normally lit, but she said her room was just always pitch black, and she just always felt afraid in this dark, just lonely dorm room. And so she didn't really want to spend a lot of time in it. So by May, still attending college, Felicia starts to experience different pains in her abdomen, just a lot of tense pain and just feeling sick all the time. So one day, it's 1991, and it's the summertime, and so Felicia's friend invites her to go to a fair, and she agrees to go even though she's feeling all these pains in her abdomen. She agrees to go. And so while at the fair, she goes into this public bathroom alone, and no one's in there. And she enters into a stall and closes it. And when she closes it, all the lights go out. And mind you, she's completely alone in this public bathroom. So she gets freaked out, and she decides to leave the bathroom because she's freaked out. And she says she opens the stall, and it's pitch black, and she's moving towards the exit to get out. She said while she's moving towards the exit, she starts feeling punches in her back and her arms, like somebody is trying to fight her. She's not screaming, she's not saying anything, she's just in shock and fear, just trying to leave the bathroom. And she said the punches were so painful, like somebody was really just wailing on her. And so she said it gets to the point where she's literally just curled up on the ground. She falls and is just curled up on the ground, getting punched all in her back, getting kicked all over her body. Her friend ends up entering the room and she runs out. And so her friend's like, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? What's going on? And she explains to her friend what she just experienced. And she said her friend tells her, like, when I opened the door, no one was in there and all the lights were on. It was just you in there. So by this time, Felicia's confused, she's terrified, she doesn't know what to do, and all the while still experiencing these intense, like, pain and pressure in her abdomen. But by that Friday, the pain gets even worse, and so Felicia decides to go to the campus clinic, and there they confirm that she is pregnant. And Felicia is scared and shocked and doesn't know what to do, but she knew that she did not want to call her mother because she knew her mother would be so angry and disappointed, and so she just was too scared to tell her. So she doesn't call her mom. Instead, she tells her boyfriend at the time, or I don't know if he was even her boyfriend, it was the guy that she knew for sure had got her pregnant. She tells him that, hey, I'm pregnant with your baby. And he's like, okay, well, that's your problem. I want nothing to do with it. Like, I can't deal with that right now. And he was already, like, leaving for, like, the weekend or something to go back to his family. So he's like, you're on your own. Bye. So she's just completely abandoned in this situation. Well, Felicia's like, all right, I'm going to just go back to my dorm and take a nap. So I guess her friend was, like, walking with her at the time. And so she goes to open up the door to her dorm room. And she said the doorknob was freezing cold. And she said that the dorm building was just like, it was a poorly air conditioned building. It was usually hot during the summertime, so nothing in there was cold. So she was shocked to feel such a cold doorknob when the rest of the building is like just hot and uncomfortable. And so her friend was like, I don't think you should go in there. Like, this doesn't feel right. Just don't go in there. Before Felicia could even, like, brush her friend off and go inside, she drops to her knees from intense pain from her abdomen. The pain is just getting worse and worse and worse. And so her friend kindly decides to take her to the hospital. When Felicia gets to the hospital, the doctor examines her and he's like, okay, you have to stay because you need surgery. And Felicia was only 19 and she didn't really understand why she needed surgery. And she says that they didn't really explain to her at the time, this is why you need surgery. But she doesn't mention it in the story either, why she needed surgery. But in my opinion, it sounds like she had like an ectopic surgery, ectopic pregnancy, and it required surgery for them to like remove it, or something concerning the pregnancy where it was an unhealthy issue and they had to remove it. So after it's determined that Felicia needs surgery, she's given a hospital bed in a hospital room, and she's laying alone in the bed at 10 o'clock at night. Her friend's gone. She's just by herself and, just trying to fall asleep. She said that the room is dark, but it's like lit enough where you can still see someone. And she says that she hears a knock at her door, and the door is open to where you can see whoever's knocking, like knocking on the wall to like come in. And she said she could see that it was a nurse, and the lady was like, hey, Felicia, is it okay if I come in? And she's like, sure. She says that as the woman is entering the room, she can see that that is not a nurse that is coming into the room. It's not even human, whatever it is, because the eyes are black and sunken into the face, and the teeth start up here at the nose and are like tusks almost, and they go all the way down to the sternum. They're so long from the top and also from the bottom like that. So it's like almost like an anglerfish. That's how the teeth are. And she said the creature has super duper long nails like chopsticks, long sharp nails. And she says when the creature finally approached her bed, dressed as a nurse. She said that it inserts its long claw into her arm, almost like it's injecting her with a syringe, like a shot. And she says when it did that, she felt from the top of her head to her feet severe, unexplainable pain just wash over her. And she said the only way she could explain this pain or describe it was like if you were to touch a hot stove and not remove your hand. So while Felicia is experiencing this like venom-like pain that's causing her to just feel like she's being burnt alive, she said that she just laid there and whispered to God, "God help me." She whispered aloud, "God help me." And the creature was like, "Oh, your God can't help you, remember?" And the creature played audibly Felicia's voice screaming and cussing at God, like word for word, verbatim, like everything that Felicia would say to God, in her private time, the cursing, she could hear it. And it was like a recording. And she said Felicia said when she heard that, tears just streamed down her face. So while Felicia's laying there in shock, in utter fear, seeing this creature and listening to it play a recording of her voice to her, she said the creature knelt down towards her, real close to her ear like that, and was like, "By morning I will have you." And she said then the creature almost got mascara on my eyebrow. But the creature then removes its claw that it had injected in her arm, and then moves backwards out of the room like it was moonwalking like Michael Jackson. And I've also, by the way, I've heard of demons doing that, like being able to moonwalk, and some have even said that that's what inspired Michael Jackson, but that's a rumor. But I've heard that before, so that's really creepy. But yeah, it moonwalked out of the room, and she said it kind of looked like a tick. I don't really know what she meant by that, but she said it looked like a tick when it did it, like almost like buggish and creature-ish the way it like moonwalked out of the room. And then she said it slammed the door shut. And she said when the door slammed shut, she jumps up, turns the light on, looks all around the room, and she says she stays up for the rest of the night. Mind you, it was 10 o'clock. She stays up until 6 a.m. and that's when she hears another knock at her door. And it's like, "Hey, Felicia, can I come in?" And she's like, "Sure." And she said when the lady entered the room, it was a normal lady, and she said, "Hey, are you a demon?" And the lady's like, "No, I'm your anesthesiologist," or however you say it. And so Felicia's still terrified, but she doesn't tell the lady what she experienced. The lady's just there to explain surgery to her. Mind you, Felicia still doesn't really understand why she's there in the first place, because she's 19. She doesn't really understand the medical terms, and they're not really effectively explaining it to her. So they prep her for surgery. She lays down on the surgery table. They're about to give her the anesthesia mask to put over her face so she could fall asleep. And they tell her to start counting backwards before they put the anesthesia over her. And she says she looks in the corner of the room of the operating room, and she says in the corner of the room is that creature with the tusk just staring at her, just waiting patiently, not saying anything, just waiting patiently to be able to collect her. Basically making good on her promise, like, "Hey, I'm waiting to collect you when you die." So Felicia's terrified to go to sleep, but they put the mask over her, and before she passes out, she's like, "God, I tried, but can you please just give me another chance? Can you please give me another chance? And if you do, I promise you I will do right." She passes out. She goes to sleep. She wakes up, and she's like, "Am I in hell?" And the doctor's like, "No, the surgery was successful. You're fine." And she's returned back to her hospital room, and 3 days later, in recovery, she's just laying in bed, and I think it's the morning time, and she gets another knock at her door. The door is open, and instead of a woman this time, it's a man, and he's dressed in green, and he knocks, and he's like, "Hey, Felicia, can I come in?" And she's like, "Sure." He comes in. She said it's a pleasant older man. He's short. He's dressed in a green suit, and he looks like he's at least 60 or 70. I picture a Santa Claus looking white man. like a pleasant, nice looking older white man with like all white hair and beard and mustache. That's what I picture. And he's like, hey, Felicia, how are you doing? And she, tells him she's doing good, blah, 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 small talk. And he's like, okay. Well, he pulls like a white rose out of his suit, and he hands it to her. And he's like, this is for you. God bless you, Felicia. And he goes to leave the room, and before he completely leaves the room, he says, remember your promise. And he exits the room. So after the man leaves, the last statement that he made to her shocks her, like, remember your promise. Like, that's a secret promise that she made to God that nobody could possibly have known because she didn't tell anybody. It was just a secret promise she made in her head to God. So it would have been impossible for anybody to know about it. Well, he leaves the room, and she buzzes for her nurse to come in. And the nurse comes in like, hey, what's up? And she's like, hey, can you please go get the man that just came in here? And she's like, Felicia, nobody has been in and out of your room. Like, it's just you here, and I've been, outside of your room, making sure everything was good. And the nurse is adamant nobody had came in and nobody had left. And the only evidence that Felicia had was the white rose that the man had given her. So it was a tangible white rose. And Felicia was sure that it was an encounter from an angel that came to remind her of her promise and basically give her a token of forgiveness. And through the years, Felicia, struggled to get closer to God, but she still slowly got closer to God, attended church, repented, changed her life, turned her life around, and she ended up becoming a nurse herself. And through her experience, she was able to impact many people around her life in a positive way. Okay, so the reason why I decided to tell these two stories is to kind of spread awareness that demonic spirits are real. They're very real. They're smarter than us. They watch us, especially when we're not living right, especially when we're cursing ourselves and cursing God. We attract negative spirits with our lifestyle and our bad decisions and the words that we speak out of our mouth, which are very, very powerful. And so that's why I wanted to tell these stories today. And also, I just also want to mix horror and Christianity stories together, because it's very possible to do that, because there is a terrible, terrible thing waiting for you if you turn away from God. So it's you can mix telling stories about God with horror, the horror genre. So that's kind of what I want to do with these stories, and it just kind of spreads awareness about it and how to get closer to God. It kind of by telling other people's stories, their encounters and stuff. And so I hope you enjoyed the video. I really enjoy hearing these stories myself, because I feel there are it's hopeful at the end. It starts off terrible and then it ends well. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoy it. And stay tuned for the next video. Bye.